Hi everyone.
Hello.
皆さんこんにちは。Today is a Jason story.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm interviewed today, so I try to speak English more rather than Japanese.
Be fun.
So I want to ask you today is what you're doing now to introduce the people.
Sure. So at the moment, I'm teaching mental health and AOD, so that's alcohol and other drugs. Plus, I'm doing private practice with Yuki.
So I know the Jason, not for a long time, but at least 4 years, and he read a lot of books and Jung and very difficult book. Even I'm reading in Japanese, I think I can't understand the whole thing. So what brought you to learn this deeper psychology, imaginary, or those, not only the counselor, right? More imaginary and more deeper, the deeper mind. What makes you to bring this area?
Oh, it was pretty much by accident. I was actually in Korea at the time, and I was teaching there, and I realized it's not what I wanted to do there, because it was just it was meant to be an international school, but it wasn't a proper international school, etc. And
so what you're teaching at the moment?
What I was teaching there, or that was in sociology, and so my previous background was teaching in sociology, history, politics, etc. But I did have sort of like a love of sort of psychology. I did do my previous sort of background was in adolescent health and welfare. So I did counseling area, but then I'd spent 10 years overseas, particularly in Singapore, Malaysia, New York, and then Korea. So to me, it appeared like everything didn't make sense, and I was quite lost, and I was just traveling around. And I didn't know what I was really doing.
What are you?
While I was traveling around, yeah, sure.
Okay.
I mean, I was teaching, but I wasn't happy. I was, I was married, then divorced, and then I was going to different kind of schools and teaching. So I was kind of like looking for something, even when I was studying. So after many years in Singapore and then living in Malaysia and teaching there, I thought I'd be happy. And then I went to New York because I thought I'd do screenwriting, etc. But then when I came back to Australia, I was still quite lost. And
what made you lost?
I didn't know what to do with my life. I thought that, perhaps what I should be doing, okay, just as long as I'm working. But the interesting thing was I couldn't really stay in my own country.
Why that?
Well, that relates to my brother's death when I was at university. So you asked in the previous question about why I got into mental health. So when I was 22 at the time, my brother suicided while I was in second year of university. So at the time I was studying communications because I thought that was the job to do. Because my previous background was I had studied marketing at TAFE, and then I went to university and I was studying communications because I love to communicate. I always kind of like loved to read about, I always loved biographies. So I always like reading about great sort of leaders, etc., how they did that. And I'd always read, if I was reading a novel, I'd actually was more interested in the author. So I loved biographies. I didn't know why, but I was interested in that. I loved communications. I had a lot of tapes about how to communicate. So I thought that's what I was going to study at university, but it was completely different.
Sorry, you mentioned about you study about adolescent health. So is that after that?
Yeah, so that was after my first degree. Yeah.
So after the communications thing?
Yeah, so actually I had, after my brother's death, I decided I'm just going to study what I want to study. And that was politics and sociology. And I did sort of like enjoy reading about, because I love reading. And I loved that before I went to university. And that was sort of like a passion of mine. But of course, you know, my brother's death had kind of like impacted me. And it wasn't until after I completed my degree, then I did a postgraduate degree, and that was in adolescent health. Because then I wanted to help people. I wanted to find out, you know, particularly with suicide, depression, why that was happening with young people. And I was doing quite well in that area. And I even was working in politics and, you know, helping with schools. And so my ideal was to, get involved in politics and youth and advocacy and things like that. But then I decided, because I was in a relationship at the time, to then go to Singapore and go there. But the other thing was I felt it was too much of a burden doing mental health at that time. There was too much pressure.
Your own mental health? Yeah,
because I was burning myself out in a sense, because I thought I had to try to fix the world. And helping others. So I was developing support groups for siblings who had lost someone through suicide. So that was part of the main sort of like project I did for my postgraduate adolescent health. And I got top marks, and everyone was like really proud of me. Like I'm developing this.
But you stopped?
I stopped. I left. I had enough.
With this adolescent's health?
Yeah, I just thought I need to get out of the country.
Okay.
I was living in my brother's shadow. I think it was just, you know, maybe I was still young and still in my 20s. I'd been overseas before with my parents a year after my brother died, so they took me to, it was the first time I'd been overseas, was to go to visit Ireland and Scotland, where all my relatives were. And I thought, you know, my original plan, so this is why I'm talking about life stories, is you have no idea where your life is going to go. You have one plan and it goes somewhere else. So my original plan was to study in Ireland and study politics, because my first degree was in politics. So I did a thesis on Northern Ireland politics, about the peace process in Northern Ireland. And I wanted to go and study in Ireland. And so my parents, you know, we went to Ireland and we looked at a lot of universities there. But there was something missing. I couldn't explain it. I thought this is where I was going to go. But then when I came back, it's not what I wanted to do. I think it was also, even though I got an Irish passport and that, but I'd still have to pay the fees there, etc. And I wasn't as passionate as I was before I left to visit.
So that means you are not quite recovered from your brother's death.
No, I thought I could forget about it and just move on, but I couldn't. No. So
what is the main strategy or main things you feel you overcome it?
Some of the strategies. So obviously that helped. I'm glad I did the postgraduate in adolescent health, because then I was like, okay, I had to look at my life.
What is about what did you study about this adolescent?
Oh, because I studied mental health.
About the adolescents.
Yeah.
So what is, you know, what part of this study help you?
Because I studied about masculinity. And I studied about why men suicided. So that made me think, okay, there was a reason behind it, because I had no clue why he died. I was only told you know, when he died. So I still remember the day when the police came to the door, and well, my father and I were out looking for him. But I'd been out with him the night before, because I used to come. I was studying at university, and I would come home on the weekends, and my brother would be. He was still living at home at the time, so sometimes I go out with him on the weekends. And this was like the Easter weekend, so it was Good Friday, and yeah, so we went. He was in a strange mood because he was very excited that I was there. And I remember when I came home, he's like offered me to make me a coffee. I thought, okay, it's because usually I'd make him a coffee or something like that. He never really made you coffee or something like that. The other thing was he wanted to drive. He said, I was always the one who took him out. I always had to drive and not drink because he liked to party and things like that. But I found this strange, like, no, he wanted me to go out, and he said, I'm going to drive. And then the other thing was I was playing in a band at the time. I was playing bass guitar. So I remember he just wanted me to play bass guitar that night, and he would sing songs. And I found that strange, like, why do you want to do a sing-along sort of thing? And then that whole night, he was just interested in what I was studying. And he was telling people, my brother's studying, about Russian history and Russian politics and American politics and whatever. Because normally he wouldn't really, with me, he would want to know, but he'd never tell anyone in public. He'd just want to, I don't know, meet girls or drink and things like that. But I found that very strange. He was paying all his attention to me. Whereas his other friend was quite concerned about him because his other friend knew about it, that he had attempted suicide and that. So he kept, but my mother had kind of explained that he was depressed, but I didn't know he'd been attempting suicide and that. She just said, just be careful with him. He's quite down and that. So I kind of I didn't think it was that serious. Plus he was in a very good mood whenever I saw him. So that's the thing. I never understood mental health. Neither did my family, neither did his friends. So, prior to that, none of us in our circle had dealt with kind of suicide or, real depression. So nobody knew what to do at the time. In hindsight, we think we could have stopped and said this or done that. But at the time, everyone was just trying to do their best. So I knew, his friend was very protective of him and was trying to tell me, you shouldn't be drinking, things like that. Yeah, but he just seemed in a very, very good mood, a very happy mood. And he was I don't know, proud of me for going to university. And I remember at the time I'd been writing poetry and things like that, like lyrics to songs and things like that. So after the nightclub in Frankston, he's like, yeah, let's go to the beach. So it was me and him and his friend, but his friend was kind of just very observant sort of thing, whereas he was he wasn't drunk because he was still kind of driving. But he was just, it wasn't alcohol. He was just in a not manic state, but in a very hyper sort of mood. But he just kept on saying, yeah, just tell me what you've written, tell me your poetry and things like that. And he wanted to form a band with me and some of his other kind of friends. So I was like, okay, we'll form a band. And because he was a very good singer. And I did play, with his friends sort of thing, because I was playing bass and that. And I was always surprised, wow, he's actually got a very good memory and a good voice. Because for me, I can't really remember lyrics and stuff like that. But he was able to sing and that was why I was surprised. I was playing with bass alone. Bass, it's a very basic sort of instrument, and it's just the beats of a song. But he could sing all the lyrics, and it was like, the way he was singing, it was like I was able to play along with it, sort of thing. So he had very good timing and beats and stuff like that. So so that was it. He was like really proud of me, and we're going to form a band and things like that. So I'm thinking, okay, great. Maybe I'll come on weekends and we can do something there. So we end up going home, and everything seemed, because he drove back and that, it seemed fine. Then the next day, he was like a completely different person, because I was in the study. I was doing some homework and I was doing some writing. I was actually writing a short story about my grandparents, about how they met and stuff like that in Scotland. So I was involved in that and printing that off. And he kind of came in, and I'm going out, sort of thing. And I said, it's about getting together with these other friends to play in a band. And he's just like, he just shrugged it off and said, I've got to go. I'll, see you later, sort of thing, And that was the last time I saw him. He drove to his friends, and then they were kind of like having a party, whatever, and he left there. And then committed suicide. So obviously he'd gone, he never came back home. So that's when everyone started panicking, because he left his friend's place. He was supposed to stay there, and no one knew where he went, or took his car or something like that. So and then it was Easter Sunday we found him. So that was Good Friday. I went out with him. He went out on Saturday. Then Sunday he was still slightly missing. So I think they found his body on Easter Sunday. So yeah, and then that's when the police came. We were out looking for him, going to his friend. Maybe he'd slept at another friend's place, whatever. I was out with my father, and then coming back, my mum had called up on the car phone and said the police are here and Paul's dead. So yeah, I still kind of remember the police being at the door, and one of them was quite distraught because he knew Paul, because Paul was quite well known in the town. And so, and to me that was a total shock, because I wasn't even expecting that. So that was a real slight reason of getting into, but I just buried it. I actually went back. I had to go back to university because it was the school holidays, and I was just numb, and I just had to go back to class. And then some of my friends kind of knew about it and trying to be supportive and all that. But then just having to go, then come back for the funeral and things like that. So I can't even remember it. It's too vague for me. It's shock.
So by studying like adolescent health, and also going to the overseas, and then just do the kind of self-journey, reflection, and then don't know what to do, but still try to figure out your purpose, right? How long does it take to get completely, it's become past for you?
It never really becomes past, but I think more manageable, and it's been almost 25 years now. So even now when I think about it, I still to choke up and things like that, because I get taken back to that. I think, sadness for him, but also for me when I was young, I still feel that sadness, because I didn't know what was going to happen. So it's like, you're going to get hit by a train, but nothing you can do to stop it, sort of thing. So I think in terms of processing, then, like I said, it probably made sense why I wanted to leave the country. Because I was, relationship at the time. And I think you know, my ex-wife, I met her just after I came back from Ireland when I didn't know what to do. And then that was an opportunity to like, okay, if I'm not going to go to Ireland, Singapore's you know, it's pretty far away. I can start a new life, get a new identity. So I did for a while, and I was able to kind of forget, and, you know, got a job there, and I was teaching and living a pretty good life there. But there was always something in the back that wasn't complete or happy. And then, of course, that impacts the marriage, and because it's almost like you're split in two, you know. You know, I got married because I guess I felt like I should get married, you know, start a new life and things like that. But yeah, I guess that all kind of fell apart because, you know, obviously, you know, my fault, and then, you know, her family, whatever. But yeah, it just wasn't working out, you know. Maybe got married too young, and I thought I could just move on, but it was always there. Yeah. So I guess it took, yeah, then going through Malaysia, and then thought I'd start a new life there. Or after that, going to New York, and then thought I'd be a screenwriter, etc. So I guess, yeah, out of that, like we're talking about, so like stories. So that actually, and that's when you start looking back, it's starting to make sense why probably I went there, and then why I had to go to Malaysia. Yeah, and then that's when I got involved with teaching narratives. I was originally going there to teach like English, and I just didn't want to teach English anymore. So I actually went to the head of department and said, you know, because I got a master's, I did a master's of education as well after my postgraduate in adolescent health when I was in Singapore, because I was working with a lot of international students. So I thought I'd go into international education. And then I planned to do a PhD, and I was going to do that in Hong Kong. And I went to Hong Kong because my supervisor at the time and my master's was going there, and he suggested I go to Hong Kong. And, you know, because my master's thesis was about Singapore and becoming an international education hub like Australia. So that was going to be my new direction. I thought, yep, that's what I'm going to work on. I'm going to be in international education. I'm going to be a researcher. And then that all fell through for some reason. After completing my master's, yeah, I just felt I couldn't do that anymore. I'd gone off track, you know. And so maybe once I went to sort of like Malaysia, and then I thought, oh, there's something about here about these narratives and people telling stories. It just resonated with me, but I wasn't sure why.
So did you find that you usually talk about the life story and the life pattern? So did you find some life pattern at that time?
No. I still just kept on going. I just thought, because I was writing a novel at the time, I was writing a fiction story of which, you know, was dealing with kind of like suicide and loss, and but it was a fictionalized story influenced by my own, about being at university and then meeting a girl from Singapore and then going to Singapore, but it kind of like doesn't work out. So originally, so after Singapore and not going into international education, I wanted to just write this book because it was something I had to get out and get the emotions out. And then when I was teaching narratives, I thought, okay, that's making sense, you know, like patterns and structure and all that. And then it wasn't until I then went to New York to study screenwriting. And it was there that it was like, oh, people are actually talking about themselves, their stories, but they're writing scripts, a fictional story. But no one else was picking up on that. They were just interested in the structure and whatever. I was more interested in them. Why are you telling this story? Why do you want to write about this? Because it's happening to me. Obviously, it's happening to them. Because the story that I was writing about, trying to write a novel about, I wanted to put into a movie, a script. So yeah, so I realized people were kind of sharing a story, but they're very critical. That's what I didn't like, because it's like people are sharing personal stories, but they just know that wouldn't really happen, that this character wouldn't do this, etc. But, you know, people will get offended because it's their pain that they're putting on paper, because you had to read it out, you know. So when I came back, and then, yeah, and then obviously I then went to Korea, and still wasn't sure what to do, because I was teaching there. And the weird thing was, I had a colleague of mine, before I went to Korea, I was kind of like interested into like imaginal sort of like work and stuff like that. And I had sort of like dreams and imagery coming up, and I was writing them down, but I still didn't know what it meant. And then a colleague of mine handed me a book on Carl Jung, Man and His Symbols. And I started reading that, and I thought, oh, this is why I'm doing this. This is my pattern. Especially, you know, chasing after certain girls, or having certain friends, or, you know, going to certain places. I couldn't make sense why I'm making the same mistakes over and over again. I thought I made those mistakes in like Singapore, but the same patterns were happening wherever I went, and it wouldn't leave me. And it was really Jung that, it's like he was talking about the shadow side and animus and anima, and, you know, about the soul, and you know, chasing projections and stuff like that. And it kind of made sense. Oh, this is what I've been doing my life. And that's when I kind of decided, okay, this
projection is kind of actually exist, or is it just illusion or imaginary, or?
No, it's real. Like, it's in the imagination, but it comes out in the real world. So, for example, if your shadow,
something in mind is
like who you're attracted to, or like some people, they make the same mistakes of the relationships, or friends, or, you know, or associations, like bad crowds, whatever. But you're like, why am I still making that same mistake or same pattern? So most people don't even think about that. They just continue on life and then blame other people. But to me, it's like, oh, it hit me hard. And yeah, I thought, I've got to keep studying about this. And that's when I made the decision to leave. And even though some of my colleagues were saying, why are you leaving here? You've only been here a few months, etc. But I decided to go study my master's in counseling. And then I had to return back home. And that was the hard part. It's like, I'm going back home. I'm almost 40, live with my parents, starting again. So it's almost like, and I thought I just messed up my whole life. Because what have I got out of it? Nothing. I'm divorced, no real relationships. Everyone else has moved on with their life. They're probably married, got house, kids. What have I got? You know, just going around overseas. Okay, I've got some great stories, but who cares? You know, I'm in a lot of debts, and you know. So when I came back, but that was good, because then I had to sit with it. I can't run away anymore.
So your pattern is always run away.
Yeah, that's why I went overseas, and you know.
How did you feel when you come back to your parents' place, because you are still living the same pattern?
Yeah.
How did you deal with it?
Well, interesting enough, that's why I ended up in Korea in the first place, because I originally, after I went from Singapore to Malaysia and then straight to New York. And then when I came back, went and lived with my parents, and I thought, okay, I can get a job here, etc. But I couldn't. And then that's why I said, no, I'm going overseas again. But that was the final, because it made sense what I was doing. And so I just had to like stick with it. Well, the good thing was, because I was studying my master's, so I had to It's like I've got 2 years to try to figure this out. So even though I was studying my master's, I was actually working on myself, and actually worked. I did imaginal work. I did a lot of imagery. I did a lot of writing. So I was actually doing almost 2 sort of masters. Well, 3, because I already done the masters before, but I was doing the masters in counseling, but I was almost doing a master of the inner work of myself. And just made myself like, I'm just going to sit here, work through this, work on myself, try to find out about my life and things like that. Yeah. So that was really the start of it, coming back from, so the Korea, I would say, is the watershed moment. There's like before and after. So that's 10 years ago, pretty much this year. Yeah. And so another 10 years are just like working.
So by doing this imaginary work, but this kind of healing stuff is doing in our entire life, but still, I know still you do continue doing, but so imaginary work or go to inside of yourself is find something with you. Yeah.
So a lot of things were kind of coming up. Yeah. So I found it actually made sense because it didn't make sense, and it was just imagery, it was dreams, it was imagination, it was almost visionary sort of like work, but it was without drugs. It was just a lot of breathing techniques, and things were just pouring out sort of thing, and I would write them down. But the way the imagination sort of like works, it starts off with one image, and until you work that out, you research it, another one comes up. So it was just like this other story is happening, which is almost like I end up having to research Greek mythology, ancient Egyptian mythology, even Mesopotamia, Roman history. And Jung, of course, and all of these types of psychology, which I hadn't really read before. So I had to, re-educate myself and that, like what's happening, because, and then, so really, if you read, so like Jung and his Red Book and his other books, he talks about really, if you want to understand Jung, you have to understand his imagination, his imaginal. That's where all these theories and then I started, and that's like why we call ourselves Alchemy Healing, because alchemy is about that. And all the great sort of scientists like Newton and Leonardo da Vinci and obviously Carl Jung and a lot of sort of like others. Einstein was very big on imagination. So they were able to see things and those sort of symbols and imagery, and then getting their theories and answers through that.
Yeah, like lots of historical these scientists seek the one answer because usually they reach the point that everything's connected, and then something happening above is something below, and then some people think Jesus is the Messiah, and then Allah is the Messiah, and then just how we see the world is creating the reality, right? So that's why you reach this point, right? Like I think you get into this too deep, and then you find the connection of the all things into one, right? Then that makes sense to you?
Yeah. I mean, I'm still making sense of it now.
This process called alchemy, right? Then still looking for some like answer for why we have this vision, something happening in India, something happening in the other country, and then but are actually the same. It's amazing, right? Yeah,
which Jung talked about, the collective unconscious sort of thing. So it's almost like you tap into something outside of yourself, and that's when you go, this is bigger than me, because I can't make sense of it. It's not just something I'm just making up, like a daydream. It's something that's, so for example, I had no interest in reading Greek mythology. That didn't make sense at all, or Egyptian mythology and all this. To me, it was like just stories. But when you see the imagery of it, it's like, oh, it kind of makes sense, because an image will, well, one of the images that came up, which came in up in Korea, was like a centaur, and there was a couple of them, and that sort of like came to me, and they pretty much give me an ultimatum. You know, either I'm going to die if I keep the life that I'm going to end up like my brother, or I can kind of like change it. So it was almost like looking at it.
Giving you some message? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was like looking at my past, my life. Like one centaur was showing me being at nightclubs and drinking and whatever. And then there was other kind of like centaurs that were whispering in my ear to keep drinking and dancing, whatever. And I realized I didn't want to do that anymore. So, and then I realized, well, I don't understand what this sort of like means. So I had to read up on it. And then I realized the Greek mythology of centaurs. And then one particular was called Chiron, who was the good centaur. And he was the, what's called the wounded healer. You know, if you go into that sort of like story, he was actually he was different from the other centaurs, because the other centaurs are the animal. They're going by their animal instinct. Whereas Chiron, he's going with the logic and that. So he doesn't get caught up with the drinking and things like that. He becomes a great teacher and a philosopher. But he dies of like a poison sort of arrow. And that's why he's called the wounded healer, because the poison kind of stays with him. Yeah. So those things were like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. The wound, we need to, in order to heal others, understand our own wound.
Yeah, usually we do the meditate or do some, something, use substance to see the vision and get some message from the God or touch to the God, or people do this. But actually, this is important process to people reach the self-actualization or something. You believe?
Yeah, but you have to, as in alchemy, the first color is black, is the blackness. Okay, so you have to go into what Jung says, the shadow part of yourself. You have to, and for me, that was the same thing. It was like going into the underworld and spending years in the underworld and being confronted with ghosts and, not literal sort of ghosts, but in your mind, things that have haunted you or things you've done wrong. Unfortunately, you're going to have to face that and make peace with that, and understand why it's kind of like happened and all that. Yeah. So it's like the dark night of the soul. It's a long struggle, but when you're kind of like ready, it'll be sort of waiting for you, sort of thing. So I was reading a lot of that, and I'm thinking, well, this actually makes more sense to me than just sort of like running away and trying to be something I'm not.
That's why your counseling method is more, rather than talking about the conscious level, more you focus on the unconscious level, what's in the big story behind, right?
Correct, yeah.
So that's why you are more interested in someone or person's story and what is behind, rather than usually people talk something okay to talk, right? But you try to figure out what's behind the story, right?
Yeah, the story behind the story, because we actually have multiple stories. The one that we present to the world, or who we should be, our duty to our family, etc. But then there's another one which is a hidden one.
Usually people hiding or forgotten.
Yeah, forgotten a part of themselves, So it's almost like you have to go down there and bring that back. So that's how I got into hypnosis, and now doing EMDR, etc. And ego states therapy, because I'm realizing that we actually have multiple personalities in ourselves, because I've seen that in myself. So although I was trained in normal, so like counseling, CBT, talk therapy, etc., I was doing another one. I was joining the Jung Society. I then studied narrative therapy. And I was more interested in people's soul. into the imagination and things like that. How can we tap into that, the unconscious mind? What is our real purpose in life? How do we get in contact with that, rather than what we've been told since we've been young and through school and through parents, etc., and society of how we should be. We have to kind of go deeper and peel all that back.
I think lots of people who try to recover from mental health or the loss of family or something usually go through the normal system, which we know. But having the therapist like you, why it's happened to me? Just a brother's death is this, this tragedy. People just take like that, but you don't finish the story like that.
No.
Yeah, you try to find out this story behind, right?
Yeah.
So in another word, you can help that with
getting meaning from that, because everyone's got some tragedy. It doesn't not necessarily kind of like suicide. It can be, addictions. It can be sexual assaults. It can be a lot of trauma in people's lives, and it's understandable to why did this happen to me. But I think it's not about getting rid of that or saying it didn't happen or kind of forgetting that, or it's okay. So how do I now move on? How do I work with that? Because that's never really going to go. It's part of your identity now. I can't get rid of my brother's death. I can't. I tried to, and I did use a lot of drinking and smoking and nightclubs and whatever. It just didn't go away. It just waited. It was waiting for me until I came home. And it was pretty much just sitting there and saying, okay, we'll wait for this to fall apart. And I still remember to this day, when it kind of did fall apart in Korea. I just remember seeing it just started snowing. And I'd never really been involved with snow before. And it was just like pure white, like snow and beautiful. But I was very distressed in that. Because I just split up with a girl then and stuff. I didn't work out the relationship, but a voice said to me, now it's time to go. It's almost like, do you believe me now? It's like, okay, I'm ready to go home and face this sort of thing. But I remember people said to me after that, like, you look like death. And they said that, like, they thought it was because I was upset about a girl, but it's like, no, I've had enough. It's like something broke. It's like, this is the end, because the imagery was so profound. I mean, I actually had that same image when I was in Singapore. I mean, I was, my ex-wife and that we had a living on a penthouse, the 30th floor, and just sitting on like the balcony, wanting to jump off. But a voice said to me, just go back to bed. It's, you don't have to end your life, sort of thing. It'll work out in the morning. And so I slept, and then maybe a day or two later, I got a job offer to go to Malaysia. So it's almost like, it's a very quiet sort of voice which will direct you where you want to go, which you don't understand. Maybe years later, you reflect back and go, okay, that's why I did this. So it's only now that seeing those patterns and things like that. So it's a huge other story underneath it all, which we can talk about another time, I guess.
Yeah, but from this experience, you can help people who are suffering and then don't understand the whole story about life, and then feeling stuck and don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And then feeling lonely or feeling only me, the one who in the dark or something. But sharing this story, it's very brave for you. But you should, by sharing that, definitely encourage people to talk about and also see what is the life story and what is the life story, something behind. Yeah. So thank you very much for sharing that your story. And definitely, some people who it's who has same experience and then might be interested in some understanding whole story, how Jason recover from this, the process, how to process these things. Yeah, definitely Jason will help you. Then don't think about I can't say don't suicide or something, but don't kill yourself. But we will understand how you feel now, and please contact.
Yeah, just important thing is, you're not alone, and it's okay to share this, and don't fear it, and the more you kind of like just like talking it out, and even if you're experiencing these imaginary, so people are afraid of that because I think associated with psychosis. But there's a new thing that's coming out now, which they're realizing, which is called spiritual emergency, which is what the world is really going through at the moment, because we don't know what to do at the moment. But yeah, that's what we're planning to do, just sharing our stories, and then someone will hear from you, and then you might spark off something, a conversation, and we want to keep that going.
Yep. And then you can, if you overcome all those things, and then like Jason found me, we found each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, definitely we change our life. And then once you work on yourself, definitely God give you some help. Then found soulmate.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. If I didn't return back home to Melbourne at that time, I would never have met Yuki.
Yeah.
And something about her on the first date was finally someone understands me. She allowed me just to talk and share the story, and she never judged. Especially, who's this guy, like he's still living with his parents and being divorced, and like the world and all that. But she had her own sort of story in that, and we were both mature enough, and we're both ready. And that's what I mean, trust the process. And if you do, you'll find the perfect person, your soulmates.
Yeah. We just step by step.
But just step by step. That's all we're saying. Just start the process and just start sharing your story. Let it unfold. See where it goes, and accept people into your life that will change you.
Yeah, this is very encouraging story. Thank you very much to sharing with us. So next time, I do my story.
Okay.
Thank you very much for watching this YouTube video. If you are more interested in other person's story, please subscribe our channel. So we start next time. I do my story, and then I start interviewing with Japanese people, and you are going to interview with the Australian in English. So we become a more connection. We are become some bridge of the Japan and Australian understanding the culture, and then we learn lots of things from other person's story.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching.
Bye.
Bye.